What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Player One versus World for a quick video on Lost Records, Bloom and Rage. Well, a quick video could be a bit of a risky one. Usually they never end quick. But I thought I'd share a quick update because I read something quite interesting recently, and it's all about Lost Records. So I thought, what would be worth sharing on here. I know people come here for the news. I know people are excited for Lost Records, as am I. Sorry. It's quite clearly showing the views that we're getting for the videos. So we'll keep that going. Obviously, very excited to keep covering this game and want to talk about a couple of details I've got seen here. I'm recording Christmas. I don't celebrate Christmas, if you're wondering. So I'm recording Christmas. So hopefully it comes out on the Wednesday from now because it's Monday at the moment. And also a little bit ill. So just bear with me if I sound a bit sniffly and stuff. It's not been a rough Christmas, if anything, for me. But as always, if you are new here, please do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn on notifications, like the video, share with your friends. Helps support the channel. It's a very small channel. We've got Lost Records, Bloom and Rage, or Lost Records playlist, actually. That's a better way of putting it. Now on the channel as well, so you can go and check out the other videos we've done, and this video will also be included in there. And if you are new here as well, hello. As you can see, this channel is very, very centric on Deck 9 and Don't Nod, and especially Life is Strange. So go and enjoy the content. We have podcasts on here. The main podcast, which is Strangecast, which will be back in 2024, early 2024. Features me and my co-host Adam Evolt. We talk about Life is Strange. We talk about Deck 9. We talk about Don't Know. We talk about a lot of content on there. And also, obviously, we'll be talking about Lost Records on there, which will be very excited to sit down with Adam, hopefully, later this week to record the first episode of 2024. So I hope you're all looking forward to that because, well, as we've spoken about before, me and Adam have covered that game for about 3 years in post-production, and it's exciting to finally got the reveal of it as well. So it'd be great to sit down and finally talk about that. But anyway, that's for another time because as we said, Strangecast is a completely different animal from what we have right here, because this was a little feature / interview that appeared on Digital Trends on the 21st of December. So, and it actually features from people from Don't Nod Montreal who are talking about Lost Records. This is the first kind of, from what I can tell, the first kind of account where they've gone public with things. Obviously, Luc wrote his piece for the Xbox news site, and obviously the developers and people from Montreal have interacted on Twitter with people about the excitement, but never really spoken about little details. But this is our kind of first interview that we have. I imagine there's more interviews. The industry is kind of currently in Christmas mode at the moment, so maybe there's a bit of a backlog with people getting their features out, but we're going to go over this piece first. So we'll kick things off right here. So yeah, this is on Digital Trends. So this was published on the 21st of December. So from the piece in itself, it features Michel Koch from Don't Nod Montreal. It features Luc Baghadoust from Don't Nod Montreal, and it features Frederique Fourny-Jennings. I believe that's her name. I believe I got that right. All three of them from Don't Nod Montreal were on a call for talking about Lost Records, Bloom and Rage, and there's a couple of little pieces. The big one, which was from the article in itself from Digital Trends, talking about Yellowjackets, which a lot of people quickly picked up on with Yellowjackets, and the kind of it has very big parallels with Lost Records, but there's kind of a little bit more reveal if it really did influence the game, or if it was we'll get onto that anyway. Well, I'll go through the piece as it is. Go and read it. I'll put the link in the comments as well, or the description. It'll be somewhere you can go and check it out. But I will read the entire article. I'm just going to pick out the quotes from our trio of lovely people from Don't Nod Montreal. So we're going to straight here with Luc Baghadoust, the game's executive producer, obviously big figure at Don't Nod Montreal, and he put here, we've had the opportunity to create this studio on the basis that we wanted. Now, for the first time, we can build strategy regarding how we're going to make this studio dedicated to this franchise. We shape the way we work, the creative, the team, the production, the tools, the tech. Everything is made towards this goal. It's the Lost Records franchise, but also the Don't Nod Montreal project. So that's exciting in itself because, as we said, we covered it previously on Strangecast. I think it was an interview with Oscar Gilbert when they were talking about Don't Nod going self-publishing and publishing its own games. I believe he briefly talked about the contracts that they had with Square Enix when they were basically, because Square Enix owns the IP for Life is Strange, and then Don't Nod is essentially contracted. Despite the fact that Don't Nod created the franchise, they become a contractor. So the publisher will give them this game, they become contractors, they make the game, etc., and then they'll still make royalties. It still makes royalties for them now as well. Life is Strange. But this is like the first pure game that they have where they can basically, and it's interesting as well because, as I said, we know Luc and Michel, and especially from Life is Strange 1 and 2, working with a publishing arm, and publishers have, their own kind of like hurdles that you have to go through. So it's kind of interesting to see Don't Nod Montreal go this direction as it is, and it's all self-publishing. It's going to have its own universe. There's no kind of like overarching publisher that will kind of be covering, be on top of them, being like, you can't cover that, or you can't make this kind of game, or you can't do that. I believe that the way that they kind of position this Don't Nod Montreal, and the way that Don't Nod has in itself given so much freedom to the Don't Nod Montreal crew, I think you're going to see the game that they've always wanted to envision. And it's very rare as well. Like, developers don't always get the opportunity to make the games that they want. Like, there's that I always refer to it as well about Killzone. Guerrilla Games was known as the Killzone studio for many, many years until Horizon came about. And that was like, a once in a lifetime opportunity for an IP to come along. They created something, and now they're completely different. Like, most kids will now think of them as the Horizon studio, the ones that made Horizon Zero Dawn. But for the longest time, Killzone was such a big affiliation with them. So all very exciting on that. So that was Luc's original quote. And as I said, I don't want this going for too long, but I just wanted to give you updates on here. There's an interesting part of this feature, or the interview, and it says here, I'm going to come on to it as well. It says, its premise does share some similarities to Yellowjackets, although Koch tells Digital Trends that Don't Nod's ideas for Bloom and Rage predated that show's release. It's likely that the same sources such as Stephen King and Twin Peaks inspired both. The most significant influence looming over Lost Records is Life is Strange, though. That's the franchise that put the studio on the map, but it's also property owned by Square Enix that Don't Nod didn't have direct control over. So yeah, that was the big kind of piece that I took away from this interview, at least, if anything, I wanted to make the video around. Yellowjackets was something that was brought up a lot. I've never watched it myself. I do want to watch it, and I looked up the premise before I came on here. Yeah, I can see why people really, really did relate to that. I was like, oh, actually, there's this heavy influence from it. Obviously, I've spoken about it for ages on the Theories episodes that we've done with Adam on Strangecast, and in general as well. Like, I always thought that the Stephen King attachment was massive, and in it, Stephen King has had a massive influence on them as well. You can see in the first Life is Strange, there's a reference to was it room 237 in Max's dorm in Blackwell? Like, it's a huge influence on it. Even the entire game, the first Life is Strange, feels like something that Stephen King would kind of create, as well as like a story. I'm not a huge avid reader, and I wish I had Adam at this point because he probably read more Stephen King than I have. But it does have the vibe of a Stephen King novel or a TV show or whatever. Like, it has that kind of influence on it, so it doesn't surprise me. And that's why, like, I think for the longest period of time, I kept saying like, oh, it's like, I kept saying, oh, it has like, maybe it'll have like Stand By Me vibes, and I can see it having influence on it. I kept talking about It Part 2 for ages. It's crazy that I kept mentioning that. So that's the big one here as well, which is that fact that Yellowjackets might have influenced it to an extent, because like in itself, the article says that Blood and Rage predates Yellowjackets' release. That's the interesting line. So it doesn't say directly, oh, we didn't take anything from Yellowjackets. It might have influenced it during the development cycle of it, but the ideas in itself, the main ideas for Lost Records' first game, is that it doesn't have that complete influence that most people thought it. So that kind of at least helps us refine out some of the influences. I still think it has the biggest influence on it, but nonetheless, interesting little bit of detail. If you have watched Yellowjackets, leave me your thoughts in the comments. I'll be interested to see if you actually think I should watch it or not, because it does seem to be like a lot of people immediately pointed that out in the reveal trailer, like, oh, it's like Yellowjackets and it's like this and it's that. And my go-to was like Stand By Me and It Part 2. I feel like the King influence is massive on that. But either way, continuing the piece as well, they put, as a result, Don't Know moved away from that franchise following Life is Strange 2, with Deck 9 developing 2021's Life is Strange True Colors. Lost Records could potentially serve as a Life is Strange successor from the original creative team, one that Don't Nod has complete ownership and control over. Koch seemed quite excited about the idea of building up not only a single game, but an entire franchise that completely belongs to creatives at Don't Nod Montreal. Michel said, and I quote, "We are working on this first game as a complete entity, but we have in mind links and all we can unravel with further games, how we could have characters come back, and what could be the follow-ups for some characters in the future. It's really liberating and great creativity to be able to work like that. Even if there was only one game, we still had the chance to think of how things can extend and know if things go right, we will be able to do that and extend those games with other ideas, follow ups, and side stories that we have imagined. As a creator, you cannot ask for something better than that, which is obviously, that is big because, like, I expected them to kind of make more games from this, like, you know, universe, but the fact that they just came out and said, "Oh, this is the first game from the Lost Records universes," which is crazy because you're basically being greenlit for so many different games that you can make in your universe and have a franchise. Like, so like maybe like that Don't Nod Montreal arm in Canada will be the kind of like the Lost Records arm for Don't Nod if this game becomes popular and successful, and fingers crossed it does become successful. But it's interesting because like that, I think that'll give them freedom. Like I hope that, for example, if they do another Lost Records game, they do kind of like do something a little bit like Life is Strange 2, which is like quite out there compared to, like, take that complete step that they did with the first Life is Strange and the second Life is Strange, tell different stories, some that might be completely different, but then obviously you have this really lovely universe where you can connect characters. So some of the characters that we've seen in the teaser trailer for this first game, that we can kind of see them come back from Blood and Rage, and they might appear in a sequel, if anything, or they just have cameo appearances. That would be cool. I'm all for that. So in itself, quite interesting. Going back to Luke, there's another part in here which is more story and gameplay details about Bloom and Rage are still under wraps. However, the developers want to evolve the narrative adventure gameplay experience with this new entry. This is from Luke, and he said, and I quote, "There are core-based mechanics that are part of the games we make, and we'll still want to use on these games regarding exploration, dialogue, choices, and consequences. But there's also room for innovation." So that's quite interesting. So like maybe we'll have the same kind of like Life is Strange vibes with like choice and consequences. A lot of this, it'll be like a true Life is Strange 1 spiritual successor, but then we can evolve a little bit and we can kind of do different things, different mechanics, and I think they do need to evolve that as well with like how far the game's come. It shows as well. Look how the game looks. It looks amazing from what we've seen so far. So I'm interested to see what they do with the gameplay element and evolution. And speaking of which, we'll move on to the next part. So this was an interesting part from Michel because that ties into what like Luke was saying about how the narrative can evolve with gameplay, but then this is like a hint of where gameplay goes. It's quite interesting reflection from Michel. So it says in the article, Koch adds that Don't Nod reference the strengths and shortcomings of Life is Strange's gameplay as it created Lost Records. He praised the rewind mechanic in Life is Strange for offering that agency and critiqued Life is Strange 2's distance from those power-based consequences, even though it was thematically appropriate. With Lost Records, a Bloom and Rage, Don't Know wants to lean into giving players more agency. So Michel said, and I quote, "Something that we're trying to push more is giving the feeling of more agency to our players with our dialogue system. We make sure that you feel more connected with your character when you're talking rather than just watching an interactive movie. Immediately, we reward interaction with the controller so you feel like you're playing the game and not playing a character who then makes the game evolve." End quote. That's interesting. That's very interesting because I even had a theory. I think, did I say the theory? I had other people maybe theorizing, and even myself, I think, like, there was this kind of potential where maybe you don't have powers in it at all. Maybe it's completely different from that. Maybe they take a completely different turn from it. I think it seems like they might be going back to power, like, and giving someone a power, at least, or many characters power. I think that I find it quite interesting that he critiqued Life is Strange 2 the way that he did, and it does say it right in the article in terms of like that had to be done that way. Like the entire point is that Sean doesn't have powers. The entire point is the story's on Daniel with him having the powers, and you have no control over it. Yes, it does affect the agency, like in terms of like the first Life is Strange 1, where you can basically rewind time whenever you want, barring some exceptional, some circumstantial scenes where your power is taken away or it's affected. But then, yeah, it does affect it. But I think the way that Life is Strange 2 is structured, the way this game is told, the story is told, I think that was perfectly reasonable, personally speaking. But I find it quite interesting that he's talked about it in this way, and it'll be quite interesting to see how they evolve things. I think they're probably going to give you a power back in some kind of way, shape, or form. I think it's not going to be like a rewind power, but I think it might be a bit more an interpersonal one, where it kind of can affect other characters and maybe connect in a different way. Not in the same way as the True Colors, like, empathy mechanic per se, I think it'll be just a little bit. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe it is a bit like True Colors. Maybe it's an evolution on something like that. Either way, let's move on to our final piece. I think this is the most interesting, personally speaking. That's just from my perspective. And this is from Frederique as well, of all people, who's the Don't Nod Montreal's managing director. We've spoken about Frederique a lot before. Had a big part in building their studio in Montreal. I think it's quite an interesting insight into the studio and the scale of this project, if anything. Like, even more so than Yellowjacket stuff, even more so than Luke talking about the gameplay, narrative adventure. I think Frederica's part's really interesting. So let me just read the entire thing. So Digital Trends' article continues. While opening in the middle of the pandemic brought its own challenges, Don't Know Montreal eventually settled in as a remote-friendly studio, entirely focused on making Lost Records the best it could be. Frederique Fourny-Jennings, I hope I pronounced her name right, Don't Know Montreal's managing director, who was also on the call, likened having a successful first game as a studio to converting a try in rugby, as it means they'll get to stick around and make more despite the economic hardships the game industry is facing. Very interesting, the rugby part. I feel like that's maybe Frederica's like half Scottish side coming through. But I read what she says, and her quote is, one thing that's deeply important to me is courage. The courage to manage, the courage to make decisions, the courage to stick to what we do in a way that makes sense while working with all other stakeholders. You have marketing and biz dev and many other people revolving around us whose mandate is for the project to be a critical success, a commercial success. We have all this we need to bring together, but it's really the courage to keep the essence of what we're trying to do, to keep these values that we're trying to bring in our game in our studio. End quote. So that's the entire article. You can go and read it. I've read most of the quotes, if anything, but yeah, that's the entire article. I found her part really interesting, more so than anything else, because the courage part is a very big thing. Like, this isn't an easy task for Don't Nod Montreal. Like, this game, like, you don't have the same kind of like thing that they had in 2014, Luc, Michel, and all the other Don't Nod devs who made Life is Strange 1. There was no expectation on that game. It just seemed like there was no expectation. It just kind of came out of nowhere. It built a massive cult following, but it never had any expectation. I remember covering it for years. I covered it for years and years. And that first Life is Strange game was the most different out of all of them, because the media attention wasn't on it. The media attention was nowhere near on that as well. There was no expectation. There was no, there's nothing there to say that, oh, it needs to be a success. This is now a self-published game from Don't Nod. Don't Nod is taking all risks. When you basically have a publisher, so for example with Square Enix, if a Life is Strange game bombed, that's on Square Enix. That they're gonna have to take the hit. They're the publisher, everything else. This is now on them. This is also one of their big games. You look at all their pipeline of games that they made: Juson, Harmony, even even the publishing games that they've done with like Gerda and Koira, which will be coming up, and Banishers, which comes in early 2024. That's from Focus. The main ones that I've seen in the pipeline that are like the most strategically important for their position as a company, as a publicly trading company, as a company that has a game of pipelines up to 2025, is first Banishers, because it's a very much like a vampire-esque game in terms of like the success it could bring, because obviously Vampire was very successful for the studio. And then this game, and I think that they're putting a lot of reliance on the hope and prayers that this game can kind of become like a Life is Strange 2.0 without the name of Life is Strange. Because, as I said before, I think Don't Know would have loved and absolutely adored to have the IP for Life is Strange, but they didn't get to keep it because they signed their deals with Square Enix, and Square Enix took control of the IP. So there is, as Frederica says, in the stressing importance of courage, it's the most important part, because you have to have that. There's going to be expectation placed on Luc, Michel, and all the Life is Strange devs who are now working in Montreal, even their new devs that they brought in outside of the people who didn't work on the first Life is Strange or the second Life is Strange. They built a studio up from the ground. They're building a game. They've already got a game that's got basically a franchise, because they're saying, hey, you can make more games in this entire series, which is quite wild. And yeah, courage is an important part for them. They're going to have to really like hope for it. Like, there's no guaranteed success that, people are going to cover this. There's no guaranteed success that IGN's going to do like, a feature on it every single week up to release. They're going to like, have to hope and put all their support and faith in all kinds of people to kind of get to where it needs to be, from developers to community to everyone and anything in between it. So it's quite interesting that she put that kind of message out there. And I think it's quite the interesting piece from the entire feature for me personally speaking, even more so than the other stuff we learned from Michel and Luc, because that gives you an insight into Montreal, because it is a new studio. Remember, it's a new studio creating a new IP, and you might have familiar faces in there. You might have the people like Michel, you might have Jean-Luc, you might have Luc, you might have Juliet, you might have all these people who Marsha, people who've all worked on Life is Strange in the past, but there's this is a different territory. It's a new IP, and in itself as well, like, people have a strong affinity to Life is Strange. Some people might just want to like cover, be stuck with Life is Strange. They might not have a connection with Don't Nod, even if they did make the first game, the second game. They might just think I'm more of a Life is Strange person than a Lost Records person. So courage is an important part for them in terms of what they're doing with their business model, their marketing, their their interested stakeholders, etc. That's quite interesting that they had that message to that, and it's quite interesting that Frederica played that point down. So I think that entire interview is very interesting. Go and read it yourself. Go and have a think about what they've said. Not a huge amount of details, as I said. Like, they're not. We only got, we're in December. The reveal happened this month. We're going to probably see details come out non-stop all the way through to 2024. We've, like, if you go on their feeds as well, you see like they're sharing little bits of information, but we still don't know which character's which. I had my second guess at trying that, but we don't know which character's which. In terms of like which name is which character, just if you're wondering what I mean there. We only know the story details. There's very little bit being given at the moment, but obviously hopes, more things will start coming out in early 2024 going into their release when they go out in late 2024. But I thought it was quite interesting, and in itself as well, just little details from that interview that Michel and Luc and Frederica gave in terms of like the studio and the kind of like the expectation, the position they're in, the kind of like, a dream IP that they're creating, but all the kind of things that come with it. I think like in itself, it kind of, with some of Luc's comments where he was talking about, and this is my final thoughts if you're wondering, some of the things that Luc's talking about where it's going to, I think it'll have some of those great Life is Strange 1 and 2 elements that you saw in the narrative and how the gameplay evolved it, but I don't expect them just to do the same thing as well, and they're not going to do the same thing. I think there's going to be time to evolve quite much with what they're doing with that. So you might see choice and consequence, but you might see a more sophisticated version. I think like it's a different team, but Harmony was made from Don't Nod, and you saw like that branching dialogue system. Adam talked about it on one of the Strangecast episodes after he played it. I've not played it, but I was admiring it for what it was. But there's been a long time. 2018 was their last game, Luc and Michel. 2018 from Life is Strange to now, you have a lot of time to, develop new mechanics, new ideas, look at what the industry's doing, look at all these games that have come out since Life is Strange 2, what they've been doing, etc. So that's all quite interesting. Then obviously we got the basically the input from the article where Yellowjackets the idea for this first game from Lost Records in the Lost Records universe predates Yellowjackets. So it's just a little bit of coincidence, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't influence it in some kind of way. Maybe during post production or something. Maybe down the line we might learn some more, but all quite interesting. And in itself as well, even Michelle talking about, the critique about Life is Strange, the article mentioning the critique about Life is Strange 2, and then the admiration for Life is Strange 1. Does that mean that we'll get powers? Does that mean we'll get a bit more influence on there? Maybe you get powers and the powers are taken away in the game at some point. That'd be quite interesting mechanic. I'd love to see them infuse that. Because obviously, as I said, I love Life is Strange 1's power mechanic. Great, loved it. But then I also loved it in Life is Strange 2, where you didn't have control of the power and you were basically at the mercy of how the story unfolds. And it was a little bit like, it did remove agency a bit, of course, but at the same time I felt there was agency in the terms of you have no control of Daniel. And like obviously you see in the third episode of Life is Strange 2 where the log cabin gets ripped out of its ground because near the end of the game, they're in a log cabin. Yeah, they're in a log cabin. Or a cabin, wherever it is. Then that cabin, it's like, Daniel just loses, like, goes completely the power just goes off him and he like destroys everything in his path like a warpath. But yeah, I'll leave it here. As I said, I don't want this going too long. Hopefully it comes in about 20 minutes. I need to do some editing, and if you're wondering, the edits have been me sniveling my nose and stuff. As I said, a little bit unwell, but I wanted to get this video out there because I want to use this channel as a kind of rolling log where you can keep up to date with the news of it, and we can kind of use it as a reference point. And as I said, going in 2024, we'll have a Strangecast episode coming out, which will be our first one of the year, and that will obviously be a big topic because me and Adam haven't talked about this game properly. Like, Adam's been taking a break, but we haven't like talked about it. So obviously very excited to do that as well. So I imagine a lot of you will be as well who follow Strangecast. So nonetheless, we'll wrap up here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you expect Yellowjackets kind of influence the production during the production stage of it, because obviously we know these ideas predate Yellowjackets. But let me know what you think. Go and read the article. Obviously, great article. Go and have a look at it. A couple of typos, a couple of spelling mistakes, etc. I was kind of a little bit. That's the journalistic side of me. I work as a journalist most of the day, and it's just there was a lot of it could have been proofread. But anyway, get away from that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do like the video, share with your friends, subscribe, turn on notifications, do all that stuff as well. It helps support the channel. It really is important to me. And obviously, thank you to everyone who's been supporting all the channels so far. This video will come out in this week, hopefully in December, hopefully, and I'm hoping to get 2 more videos out potentially this month before the month is out. So that'll be, I think, I don't think we've had this much output on the YouTube channel since I've started it. And yeah, I'm very tired and a lot of things, but I'm very excited about Lost Records, and Lost Records Bloom Rage specifically as well. So do stay tuned. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'll obviously be floating around there as well. But until then, we'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys. Bye.